Interested in it. So for the past few years I've been really interested in seeds and working with seeds and trying to learn more about them. And thinking about seeds as a technology, and seeds as something that have adapted alongside humans for thousands of years. So I'm just like obsessed with them. I love thinking about them, and I hope that I can share my little bit of knowledge with other folks and we can have a conversation about it. So I wanted to start by just talking about what a seed is and talking about different ways they look, and also share a couple of tricks both for figuring out what part of the plant is the seed, how to clean seeds, and how to ensure seeds are viable. So I'm talking about this because right now we're kind of peak season, but a lot of plants are maybe just starting to make seeds, or they're over the next few months plants are going to be ripening and making seeds. So even if this is your first time ever gardening, it can be the first season that you start kind of paying attention to the life cycle of a plant, when you can harvest seeds and how to save them. And there's a lot of benefits to saving seeds locally, or saving seeds from your own garden, like tons and tons of them. A few are that they're adapted to this climate, and our climate is changing. I mean, every single year our expected dates for the beginning and end of the season are shifting. The conditions of the season are shifting because we're in a climate crisis. So even these little acts, like growing seeds from our own gardens and sharing them in community, like that actually does a lot to create genetic diversity in the kind of foods we're eating. Growing from seed means, for me, I really like to grow foods from home, from my cultures, things that I can't usually find in the grocery store. So it means a lot to me to be able to grow those foods and harvest them and share them. I can grow a lot of medicinal plants and native plants for pollinators, which I love doing. And I mean, there's kind of endless benefits to growing from seed. The other day, I was talking to someone. I was talking about growing plants from seed, and this person was like, "Isn't that what you do?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but it's more complicated than that. You know, there's like some tricks." So in front of me are a bunch of different kinds of seeds. I have a few different kinds of seeds here, and I want to talk about different ways that seeds look, how you can identify when they're ripe and when they're ready to harvest from the plant. This is the time, right now is peak season, so some things are starting to go to seed. Does anyone know what I mean when I say going to seed?
Yeah, it's already flowered.
And when they turn flower, and then later on they start to dry a little bit, like that, like cilantro.
Exactly.
¿Cebolla?
No,
Cebolla, chives, garlic chives.
Garlic, okay.
Yeah. So
I have one like that in my little pot.
Yeah.
It dry up and then it stay like this. And it's gonna grow seed and then turn like that color. And then sometimes you don't have to pick them; they fall in there, and then during the fall they grow again.
Yeah.
On their own.
Yeah, that's what I've given up on. I just let them do their. I'm a very lazy gardener. So, what was I gonna say? This. That description was perfect. So going to seed means this is like the cycle of a plant. It's going to grow, it's going to make a flower. The flower will get pollinated, and when it gets pollinated, it can form into a seed, or sometimes it makes a fruit which protects the seed. So plants are actually going to seed throughout the season, typically towards now might be the time you see them start going to seed. And I picked this cilantro as an example of looking at different kinds of, you can see different stages of ripeness. So even if a plant has started to form a seed, it's not necessarily ready to plant until the seed is ripe. So there's little things you can do. So here you see these ones are very small and they're very green. And these seeds are brown, and they look a little bit closer to these. So these ones are ripe seeds. They've dried, they're mature. So if you were to plant these, you have a higher likelihood of getting a good plant. Whereas if you plant these little green ones, you probably won't. Maybe you'll get something, you probably won't. Another thing you can do, if you're looking at a plant and you want to know if the seeds are ripe, a little rule of thumb, or a common thing you can do, is you just kind of press your thumb into it, and if the interior is like soft and milky, if it's wet, if there's like white sap, the seed's not ready yet. Whereas if you take it, let's pick a dry one, and it's dry, not always, because we're experiencing drought, but a lot of the time that seed might be ripe and it might be mature. So it might be a seed that you can now save and you can replant. And as you were saying, with a plant like cilantro, the seeds will drop in the soil, and usually it'll grow in the same, it's an annual plant. An annual plant is one that will grow, its season is only 1 year, whereas a perennial plant, it's going to resprout from the same roots year after year. But something like this, it only lives 1 year, but it'll reseed itself. The seeds will fall, and in that same area you'll see it continue to grow. So this is something that I just picked from the garden over there. So this is the seed head from garlic chives, and you can see the flower has been pollinated and now it's dried, and it still kind of has this flower shape. If you shake it, it makes a sound, and if you start to kind of shake it out into your palm, these little black specks that you see are the seeds. So with something small, sometimes if I just need a few seeds, I can just, do it with my hand. But if I have a lot of seeds and I want to clean them in order to save them, or have, I got these, there's proper sieves for seed saving. I just got these from the dollar store. They're just like kitchen sieves. They do the same thing. But if I want to clean seeds, what I often do, hold on a second, is I use, this one has a mesh that's like a little bit bigger. This one has like a finer mesh. So I'll stack them, put my seed heads in there. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Like you can put them in a bag, you can kind of whack them so that the ripe seed falls to the bottom. But this is one way I do it, where you kind of agitate it like this, and you'll start seeing the seed that you want to save gather there. And so that's a way, if you're dealing with a lot, where you can start to isolate and clean your seeds, which just makes it's a little bit more practical for saving, because when you get to the next year and you have this big bag of plant material, this is like my life story. My life is full of these big brown bags with no label, full of like, where I'm like, of course I'm gonna remember it's my favorite plant, but I don't. All right, we're gonna dump this, sorry, for the next demo. I'm gonna show you some other seeds. These I took from my garden today. This is from columbine, which is a native seed. Do you guys want to pass it around? It has such a beautiful seed pod, and you can see that the seeds are starting to fall to the bottom. So just to take a look at it.
Seed also naturally.
They'll go crazy. They'll drop seeds and just grow and grow. But I just wanted to show, like, when the plant has made seeds, it's matured, but you're like, okay, all I see is this weird little alien pod. Where are the seeds? So the seeds are actually inside. This is an old one. Okay. So you can break open the seeds. So I'm just gonna knock this out here. But then, like, this has been sitting. I've had this.
There you are.
Oh yeah, it's so beautiful. Will you show other people? It's such a beautiful plant. Okay. So I don't know. I've started this seed. No, I've had this seed sitting for a long time, and I thought today would be. So sometimes if seed is sitting around for a long time, you don't know if it's any good. So I have this test I do. This is just water. And it doesn't work with everything, but it works with a lot of things. And it's a way also, you can do this with honestly things if you're going to plant the seed. And you soak it in water for a few hours or for a day. And with most things, what's going to happen is the good seed that you can plant is going to sink to the bottom, and the stuff that isn't ripe enough is going to float to the top. And soaking for a while also kind of just helps when you plant it. It helps it germinate. So I'm curious about this. I'm making you all watch my experiment. So you can see the better quality seed sinking to the bottom, and the stuff that is less good is floating to the top. So if if you've saved seeds or like brought seeds, you know, like I'll get seeds from back home or whatever, this is one way to check. And then when you're planting, you're going to have a better rate of success. You'll have a better germination rate. So if you want to save these, you can literally just pour off the top. So I'm going to pour off the you know, and you can do a couple rounds like that, and then whatever remains I can sieve in here. So I call that the float test. I don't know what else to call it.
Eso es para todo tipo de semillas? That's for all?
Not every seed, but a lot. Like I use it for like peas, beans, corn, cilantro will work. It's hard with really small seeds. Like these are poppy seeds, and you can see those are the seeds. This is the poppy seed pod, and the seeds themselves are so small. So you can do it, but I never, with a seed that small, I usually don't bother because it's just too small. This one I wanted to talk about winnowing. So these seeds have a little bit of a papery coating on them, and you can actually what's a girasol? Oh no, it's this is it's loofah. You know that like yeah. It's I grew loofah. Actually, we eat it. The young one. Like my dad's side is from Bangladesh, and we cook the young squash, and it tastes really good. And then if you keep it on and it makes like huge flowers. It's so beautiful. And I like the sponges. I think it's cool. Actually, I had this old lady neighbor, sorry to say, I had this neighbor who like she had a cool garden, but she didn't want to talk to me. And now we're good friends because I brought her these seeds. Like every day I'd be like, hey, like yow, like cool sunflowers. And she'd be like, but now we're good. It was these seeds that won her over. These ones, this is a native wildflower. This one in English, it's called New York ironweed, or Vernonia noveboracensis. You don't have to say that. I was flexing, you know. But we might plant some of this today if anyone wants to. It likes being in kind of wet areas. It grows really tall and it's purple. And I love planting native wildflowers and pollinators because I feel like they've just been here for thousands of years. Like they know it. I guess I said it earlier that I'm a lazy gardener. Like I like things that just kind of want to do their thing. Like I don't want to fuss over anything, and so I like planting things that know what they're doing. And then this one I wanted to show as an example. This is another native wildflower. It's called Desmodium. And this one is actually, it looks like this is the seed. There's not a ton of, most food crops are, they've been adapted with humans. So one of the things that comes as a result of that is the seed is easy for us to identify and easy to plant. So like a bean seed, like one of the reasons, like it's very clear that this is the seed and it plants and there's some consistency. Like I know if I plant it, it's gonna come up maybe within 2 weeks or something, is because like we've been in relationship with this seed for thousands of years. Like, you know, whereas a lot of wildflower seeds, because they haven't been kind of bred for food, they don't have to be, they operate with a different set of conditions. So this one, it looks like this is the seed, but actually you have to kind of like pop open the skin, oops, and it jumps out, and it's got this tiny seed. And it's hard to get into that seed coat. Like this could be in the soil for years and years and it could germinate eventually. So people call that a seed bank that's in the soil. I'm gonna show you what I do when I'm starting seeds. Everyone who gardens does it differently. Everyone who grows plants will tell you they have a different way and their way is right. And it's fine because there's a million ways to do this. When I'm starting seeds, I make my own soil mix. So I buy usually an organic potting soil. Like this, like I can show you the kind that I got, but it's like pretty loose, and I like to grow with organic soil. But when seeds are starting, can someone grab me a bean or like any of the seeds? Thank you. Gracias. Okay, so little botany. A seed is the embryo of a plant. So it's a genetically distinct organism. And inside of the seed, it actually has a lot of nutrients. Like it has, once the surrounding conditions are right, so once it's warm, once there's light, once there's some water, once it's in okay soil, the seed knows that it can grow and it has some nutrients. Like if you were to cut this open, inside of it you would see what will become the root, what will become the first leaves, the first two leaves, or the, we call it the seed leaves. And then there's what's called endosperm. I don't know how you say endosperm in Spanish. I don't know. It's what the plant is going to live off of. So what that means is when you plant seeds and when you start them, they don't actually need a lot of nutrients. Once they sprout, once they have leaves, you should give them like really good soil so they have nutrients, but right at the beginning, they actually don't need that much. And so what I do, so I get like a nice soil, but I also get this stuff. You can get it at a garden store or at Home Depot. This is, it's called coconut coir. It's just coconut fiber, and it holds moisture and it keeps the soil really aerated. So it means that the seedling can make really good roots. It can create a healthy root system, but it doesn't have any nutrient. So if it doesn't have enough nutrient for a healthy plant to grow, but I do add it when I'm starting seeds because it gives the roots a really good structure and it holds moisture. And so when you have a seedling, it's like a little baby plant. It really needs regular moisture. It needs moisture every single day. It can't get too wet. Like you need to baby it. So I have had really good success with basically making a mix that's half this stuff and half soil. And the coconut fiber, actually I buy it in blocks. And it's really cheap. Like I got this this whole bucket of stuff probably cost me like $4. And you buy these little blocks and you add water and it expands a lot. So from a block this big, like you'll be able to get a whole bucket of material. And yeah, potting soil, there's like 10 million different kinds of potting soils. Okay, so a thing that you don't have to do that I do that is a little bit extra is for starting my seeds, I found this. It's a screen with kind of big holes. Like it's bigger than a window screen. You don't have to do this. I think it also helps the seedlings because you don't have any really big chunks in the soil, and sometimes having those large chunks like a big piece of mulch or something, the seedlings just struggle. So what I do is I actually take my potting soil, and I sift it. It's an imperfect system, but I sift it like this. It takes a while, so I'm not going to do all of it, but I have to do more than I've done. I think it's one of the screens from someone's worm compost bin, and I was like, that looks like a good screen. But this is just because I'm doing this class, so you have to deal with me being crazy. So I'll keep sifting this after doing the demo so that we have more. But you just get in there, sift it for a while, and then what I'm gonna do, what you get is this like light, fluffy, here, you wanna feel that? It's like very light and fluffy and soft. It's really nice. Yeah. Okay, we got a little bit of sifted soil, and then I'm gonna just cheat. So if we're doing this perfectly, all right, I'm gonna talk about what we start seeds in. The big chunks are really good. the reason I don't use them with the seed starting mix is because I think just having a consistent fine mix helps the seedlings form a really nice root structure. So the stuff we're sifting out, this is just something I like to do. I like to sift out these kind of larger chunks like this, and it's totally fine if you keep them. It's not a big deal. I have just found that when I sift the soil like this, the quality of the seedlings and the root because the soil is really consistent in size, they can kind of like extend their roots throughout the entire place that I planted in, and so they just seem to be a little bit healthier. So I started doing it, but it's totally fine to have this stuff in there. It probably makes them a little tougher, you know?
Can't baby them.
I know, maybe I baby them too much. Okay, so now we have like a nice bit of soil, this like beautiful soft soil. So I'm gonna make a mix in this bucket. So what I like to do is I take the fine soil and I do about half, or maybe a little more than half of the mix is the sifted potting soil. And again, did everyone touch this? It's like soft and fluffy. It just feels so good. Esponjoso. Spongy. I'm learning, you guys. Someday. And then, so about half of this and about half of the coconut mix. Maybe a little less than half. And let me add another handful. And then always, this is maybe the best tip I'll give you, I always get it wet before I plant. So rather than using dry soil and then putting the seed and pouring the water on top, I always get it wet first and then place the seed in there. And a thing I should have said earlier is now, because the weather's hot, it's a good time to plant directly in the soil. It's fine. Like a lot of things will do a lot better if you plant directly in the soil, like if you're planting beans or sunflowers, whatever. So this mix I use if I'm starting like in a pot, and usually I actually do this earlier in the season when it's a little bit colder. So I'll do this. There are things in this climate, we have to start them inside before the weather's warm enough if we want to get fruits or produce. So like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, like if you want to harvest them, you have to plant them before they can be planted outside. But the things right now that I would typically, most things I would actually just plant directly in the garden. And then the things that I might plant in a pot are things like flowers that might take a long time to grow. Like they might, it might be a perennial that I'm waiting. I'll use this example. So this is actually, it's like a passion fruit. It's a native variety. It's called maypop. Like passion fruit is parcha, I think. Parcha, it's sour, right? The little round. It's like parcha. It's a sour fruit, and this is a native variety. It's also called passion flower or passiflora. So it grows really slowly. So I planted the seeds a few months ago, and I want to pass it around actually because this is an example of the seed leaves that I was talking about. So here you can see there's two bigger leaves that are round, and those are, the botanical term is cotyledon, or you can call it seed leaves, and they don't actually look like what this plant's leaves look like. So the little pointy leaves here are growing into what the actual leaves look like. So these ones are the ones that are inside the seed that are helping the plant gather nutrients from the soil, and then these are the true leaves.
Los nutrientes que necesita, pero después ya empiezan a crecer las semillas que realmente va a tener la planta.
Because this one is really delicate and grows really slowly, I'm starting it in the pot, because in the garden it won't. It needs to be helped along a little bit. So the thing we're doing when you're starting a seed is you have to give it the perfect conditions to, where's my little bean? I lost my bean. Oh, it's right here, it's right here. Okay, so right now the bean is dormant.
Ahorita está durmiendo.
And the conditions it needs to break dormancy, it's different for different plants, but very broadly, it'll break dormancy if it has enough light. So usually emit about 8 hours a day.
Como unas 8 horas de luz.
And often it'll do better with bright and direct light,
Por eso va a ser mejor.
at least for the new ones. And so that's a common issue.
Tal vez puede ser un problema común.
And then also consistent moisture. So if you are watering it a little bit and then it completely dries out and then you water a little bit,
Y luego la vuelves a
that's fine when the roots are established, but when you're just starting the seed, it really needs consistent moisture, especially right when it sprouts. It's really, really delicate, so it needs some tenderness. Let's talk about what you start the seeds in, and then the thing I hate the most is the paper egg cartons. Those are like the worst thing to start a seed in. So when I'm starting seeds indoors, so this is an example of like what you're talking about, keeping moisture in there. So this is a plastic egg carton, and I actually think it does pretty well. I punch holes. You can see I punched little holes in all of the bottoms and also in the top. Because you want to keep moisture, like you can buy those sets that have the plastic lid on top, and it's good. Actually, it works. It creates a little greenhouse and it keeps moisture in the soil, which is it's a really common issue with seedlings, that they dry out too quickly. So that's the reason a lot of people's seedlings die. But they also need air, so I think sometimes those lids, when you put them on top, they create an environment that can like generate a lot of mold, or the roots can rot. So I kind of will use them. Often what I do is I use them right when I'm getting the plant to pop, like right when I want the leaves to emerge, and then once the leaves have emerged, I will maybe put it on for a few days, take it off sometimes. You kind of have to observe and see what makes sense with the plant. So if they look like they need some more moisture, use it, and if it seems like it's not doing much for them, you don't have to. If I'm starting in the winter, I actually use lights. So I just set it up in my house. I get shop lights, which you can get at Home Depot. They cost about $20, and it's just like an LED light, and I get the warmer tone, and it's written down in the sheet. So the warmer light color, and I just hang them with zip ties, and I keep them right above, like only about 3 inches above. And then as the plant grows, you want the light to be close, and then the seedling will grow, the seedling is going to grow towards the light. And so if you have it in a window, sometimes you'll see that the seedlings start to bend towards the window. They get a little bit leggy. They might still survive, but they're not as strong, they're not as healthy. So if you want them to be like really healthy, keep the light close to it, and you can move it up slowly if it seems like it's too hot. Mainly you just kind of like observe them, and you're like, oh, are you doing okay? The beginning of our season, so when I talk about the growing season, or the beginning or the end, what I'm referring to is the first and the last, the last frost and the first frost. So the last day where the weather freezes overnight, and then the first day in the winter where the weather freezes overnight. And so that's like, that window is getting wider because of climate disaster. But typically it used to be May 15th around here, and now it's like listed end of April, May 1st. So even like 2 years ago, it would be about May 15 to about November 1st would be the length of the growing season. So then when you're planting, like if you buy a seed packet, you can see the growing season of a plant. So you can say, oh, it'll often have like a number of days. I might say 60 days or something. So you're like, okay, if I plant this, maybe I'll be able to harvest whatever this vegetable is in about 60 days or about 120 days. So you can kind of time it in that way. And then there's actually a calendar in that garden. Like there's resources. URI has a really good resource that tells you approximate planting times. Oftentimes, people will get really panicked and they want to plant everything at the earliest possible time. Like, oh, it's February, like I need to plant everything in the greenhouse now in order for it to be ready for me to plant out. And you can actually continue planting throughout the season. So a lot of people would say now is too late to plant, and it is too late to plant. Like, I wouldn't plant tomatoes now, I wouldn't plant peppers now, but there's a lot of things you can plant and you'll get a fall harvest. Like if you plant a lot of greens, broccoli, kale, you can plant a lot of flowers. I brought a lot of sunflowers today because I thought it might be kind of a nice thing to start, and if we plant sunflowers now, like there's a good chance you'll get blooms late summer, early fall. It's also kind of an experiment. Like I think I'm often surprised by how late things can grow. And sometimes I'll also learn, like I planted that too late and it didn't work. So also for a lot of annual vegetables, it depends on the plant you're trying to start. So sometimes you'll see this term indoor sow. No, what's the term? Indoor, I'm losing my mind. Sorry. There's a start indoors and direct sow. So start indoors means maybe you have a little greenhouse, maybe you have growing lights, maybe you have a room in your house with really good light, so you're able to start your plants indoors before it's warm enough for them to survive outdoors. So that means like the nights are still cold, it's still freezing, but you can start that tomato seedling inside, and that means if you plant it out early June or something, it's going to be able to make fruits. So that's an example of one I would definitely start early on. If you're starting native flowers, a lot of them need a period of cold, a period of warm, like they're accustomed to this climate. So you can either set them outside, but if you want like much more consistent germination, you can do it inside, and you can give them like a certain amount of time in the cold. Like you can literally refrigerate them for a period of time. That's like kind of complicated. I'm giving you a complicated answer. The short answer is it's different from different plants, and I'll send you a calendar that will help. But so that's starting indoors. Direct sowing. Direct sowing just means I'm putting it in the earth, or I'm putting it in my pot, and it's exposed to the weather conditions outside. And so kind of an interesting thing about starting indoors and transplanting as opposed to direct sowing is that some things actually really like being, like if they're transplanted, like if I start them here and then I transplant them into this bigger pot, and then I disturb their roots and transplant them into a bigger pot, it actually kind of helps them. Like tomatoes, if you disturb the roots a tiny bit, it's actually good for them, and it makes the roots a little more vigorous. Whereas there's a lot of other plants like cucumber or squash or different plants in that family where they don't, like melons, they don't like their roots being disturbed. So actually if you just plant them in the ground, they'll do much better than if you try to transplant them, and they might actually get, the plant might get harmed if you're transplanting them. So it's almost like a family, it's like a personality thing. So hardening, do you want to tell us what hardening off is? The metaphor I used once was that, so your seedlings, like your babies, they're just like in the nursery, they're living at home, you baby them, they're warm all the time, like you're feeding them nice soil, and then like they get a little older, like so I harden them off when they have a full set of true leaves. So it's not these round leaves, they'll have at least 4 leaves, not just those 2 round leaves, but 2 leaves that look like what that plant's leaves look like. And that is, not every plant is going to have those 2 leaves. I know I keep being like, not everything. So it has its true leaves, it's a little bit older, it's like a teenager, and you're like, okay, like you can go out on your own a little bit. Like you just set it outside for like a few hours so that it has, actually wind agitation is really important for plants. It like breaks, experiencing a lot of wind will break cells in the stems of a plant, and it actually makes it grow much stronger. So things like wind, exposure to the cold, exposure to heat, temperature changes.
The sun too, right?
And the sun.
Rays.
Yeah, like the direct rays of.
Yeah.
So you do that for a few hours at a time, and then after you do that a few days, you can set it out overnight, but keeping it in the same pot so that you're not disturbing the roots. And then finally, when it seems like it's doing okay, you can actually transplant it into the earth or into a larger container that's outside.
A lot of people have gone through that process, and then they put them, they're so excited and they put them out, and then they don't survive.
Yeah, I've done that before, where I'm like, oh, like, my cucumber. I feel like we have a lot to talk about. Okay, so we've had this bucket of soil. It's about half sifted potting soil, about half coconut fiber. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna add some water, and just like a little bit at a time, and just make it like nice and mucky so that it's like workable. The reason that I'm not using like normal garden soil, when I'm starting seeds, I will often buy a bag of soil. You don't need to do that. You can use normal garden soil, but it might have like soil pathogens or weed seeds in it. When I'm starting seedlings, I'll often just buy a bag of soil instead of using garden soil, because the garden soil might have like bacteria, pathogens, or a lot of weed seeds in it. And so typically I'll just buy, like just for that point, I'll buy it before I mix in compost that's like been outdoors. It's another thing I'm not too picky about, but definitely like if I'm working with other people, or if it's your first time gardening, or you're not great at identifying what you're planting versus different weed seeds, then I would say just you know, buy a bag of soil rather than using garden soil that you already have. What seeds am I going to start? Okay, so I picked the New York ironweed, which is a native perennial, and then I also grabbed some okra. Okra will do great if you plant it right in the soil outside, and it loves heat, and it's a good time to plant it. Maybe a little bit late, but I think you'll still get flowers and fruit. And I used to hate, my grandmother cooked okra a lot when I was a little kid. It's like very traditional for us, and I hated it growing up, and now I just hated it. No, because she'd always make it and it was slimy, and now like I would do, you know what I mean? I would kill someone to eat that okra. I wouldn't kill, it was dramatic. I'm not gonna kill anyone. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like that particular, yeah. I wouldn't kill someone. It was dramatic. Listen, I think our diet doesn't have enough slime. I'm not a doctor, but it's my theory. I really think so.
Let's do it on a grill.
Oh, really? Oh, I've never done that. We definitely cook it. Like you chop it and you like stew it for a long time. So it's slimy, but it's really good, like with good spices. If you have like garden space or containers, you can plant directly there, and you don't have to do this at this time of year because it's warm enough. So I get these trays from like nurseries, throw them out every year, and I usually just get them for free. Like I'll look on Craigslist and I'll get the free old trays, and at this point I have too many, so I'm getting, now you get to have them. This one is unfortunately very small, but it's okay. Maybe two people can share it or something. These are plug trays. A lot of nurseries and farms will use them. There's a lot of different ways to start seedlings if you're going to start them and transplant them. Some people make soil blocks. Some people just plant them in big flats. And then once things have healthy enough roots, they separate out plants from the flats. There's like 1 million ways you can do it, but today I had these, so we're gonna use these. So you can either grab one of these trays. I don't think we have enough for everyone. You can grab one of the smaller pots. Whatever you're being called to. So we'll fill it with some soil that is already moist. Whatever we plant, we have to label. Really label it. Don't forget to label it. Maybe label it 2 times, because you'll forget what it is, or I'll forget what it is. So I just use these popsicle sticks. Sometimes I use a little bit of tape. I'll either use like a popsicle stick, which you can get for like $1, $2 from like the dollar store, or I'll put a piece of masking tape with the whatever I'm planting and the date I planted it, just to kind of keep track about how long it takes things to grow. And a little rule of thumb that I've learned is when you plant the seed, for most things, the right depth to plant it is about 3 times the size of the seed. So these are okra seeds. Someone grew these in Westport, Mass, so they're like grown close to here, pretty adapted to this climate. So I'll plant them about a 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit more than a 1/2 inch deep. You guys are just seeing all the ways that I only garden with trash, but these are like old takeout chopsticks, which are the most useful gardening tool. So let me do a tray first. No. I'm gonna do this one first. I'm gonna poke a hole about a 1/2 inch deep. Brought to you by Takeout Chopsticks. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to repeat the awkward jokes. And I'll put 1 or 2 seeds in each hole. So you can do either. I mean, some places will say put 1 to 3 seeds in the hole. So the idea is that not all of them might germinate. So if you want to be sure, like if you're planting this big tray and you don't want to have a lot of empty cells, like plant 2, maybe plant 2 or 3, and then you can thin out. You can pull, like if there's a smaller one, you can either pull it out and, you can eat it, you can compost it, or you can, if the root is healthy, you can even pull it and you can transplant it into another pot. So I will often do 2, but 1 is just fine. Both options are good. Now I'm gonna put in 2 because I'm sorry. I asked everyone and then I didn't take half the people's advice. But I'm gonna put 2 in the hole just cause. So we'll put 2. Keep in mind that if both of them germinate and they're growing next to each other, they will get really crowded if you leave them both. So you're gonna have to thin them out. You're gonna have to pluck one.
That's what I have a problem with. Even direct sow, I have a hard time pulling like carrots.
Yeah. Me too, because that's like choosing a favorite friend. Yeah.
And I tried putting the greens in soup, but the carrots are very bitter.
They're good for you. I feel like bitter and slime, 2 things missing in our diet. We need more bitter and more slime.
Have you tried bitter melon?
Yeah, we cook. That's another thing I hated growing up. But it's now I love it. But it was like, my grandma would make it, and I would be like, "Why are you trying to poison me? Like, what are you?"
What was that? I missed it.
Oh, we were talking about bitter melon. Has anyone eaten bitter melon?
Hay un melón.
Okay, we only have a half hour.
Tenemos media hora. Pero voy a hacer.
These seeds are really small. So what I'm gonna recommend is actually to just press really small seeds like this, get the soil really nice and moist, and just press them into the surface. And just press like a few into the surface. Oh, you can see them moving on the wind. Okay, cool thing about these, they have this little tuft because they're designed to be like picked up on the wind so that the seed moves. It's a tactic. Survival tactic. Okay, let's get started. I've been talking a lot. So over there are some trays like this. So there's not quite enough for everyone. There's trays and there's little pots. There's a few kinds of seeds, not too many. So there's some of these native flower seeds. There's some sunflowers. There's marigold. There's some okra. There's a lot of this variety of bean that a local seed saver gave me if anyone wants to just take some home. But I think if people want to kind of fill up a tray with some soil, I'm going to make a little bit more soil mix while people grab trays and seeds, and then everyone can start a few seeds to take home. And when you take them home, the key things are make sure they have enough light. So you can keep them out. You can keep them outside if you have like a backyard, balcony. Keep them outside so that they get at least 8 hours of sun. and make sure you water them,
Y asegúrense de echarles agua.
and just keep an eye on them, and talk to them sometimes.
Puede hablar con ella si quiere.
I'm serious.
Sing some songs.
I'm not joking.
No estoy-
Everything else is.
No, eso es cierto. Hay gente que le habla a las plantas.
Said I'm true, it's true.
You gotta talk to them.
Hablar con las plantitas.
You gotta talk to them.